Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I finished this book 6 weeks ago and I'm still not sure what I thought of it. Here's my attempt at a review of Children of the Black Sabbath by Hébert. So this is a book that I think you would classify as literary fiction, albeit literary fiction that has definite horror elements to it. So the kind of setting and plot definitely feel like horror. It's set in a convent and it's about devil worship, but it is written in a very literary style. It's quite kind of experimental. And Anne Hébert was an author and poet who won multiple literary awards in her native Canada. So she lived in Quebec, and this book was originally published in French. So it was published in French in 1975 and then translated into English in 1977. You can see this is the original English edition, which has quite a creepy cover. There was subsequently a paperback edition that has a more salacious cover, so tapping into that kind of 70s sexy devil worshipping nun vibe. So yeah, it's a book that was marketed in quite different ways, I suspect, for different target audiences. But yeah, Anne Hébert was a very well respected author in French Canadian literary circles. She won the Governor General's Award in Canada, which is the kind of preeminent literary prize in Canada, I believe, 3 times, twice for novels, including this one, and once for her poetry. The book is still in print in French, but it's out of print in English. There was a fancy edition published by Centipede Press in 2015 with an introduction by the horror author Thomas Tessier, but that was in only a limited run and it's been out of print since then. So I ended up getting this copy off eBay via a save search on eBay. I lucked out and got a copy for about £10. Typically, it looks like it goes for about £40 or £50, so I think kind of $60 to $70. So it is quite a sought after book by some people anyway. And it's an interesting book. I'm going to do something I don't normally do now, and I'm going to read you the blurb for this book because it's a difficult book to describe, but the blurb does quite a good job of it. Quebec, 1944, the convent of the Sisters of the Precious Blood. Within its prison-like walls, the sisters guard their terrible secret. Sister Julie of the Trinity is possessed by the devil. She suffers tortures of the flesh and mind. Visions. Her mother and father locked her for days in their room, their caresses mingling with blows while the children huddle outside in the shanty's squalor. The forest clearing where the villagers let their lust run wild while they wait to pay homage to the powers of darkness. Her mother's naked body offered in sacrifice on the blood-spattered altar. These rituals of her childhood become fused in Sister Julie's mind with the daily offices of the convent, until all within its walls succumb to her madness and are swept into the whirlpool of her torment. The sisters watch in horror and fascination while she prepares herself for the consummation of her devouring passion, her flesh marked with the emblems of her possessor. So as you can tell from that, it's a very graphic and disturbing book. As I said earlier, the main theme of this book is devil worship, and it leans fully into that in quite a kind of 70s way. But it does it in a way that doesn't feel exploitative in the way that a lot of 70s devil worship stuff feels. This, as I say, definitely feels like a work of literary fiction. And the writing style is quite unusual. For example, Anne Hébert made the choice to write some of the chapters in the third person and some of them in the first person. And I'll be honest, it wasn't always immediately apparent to me for those first person chapters who the narrator was. It does change between some of the chapters, I think. So the book overall has a really weird, surreal, dreamlike feel to it. But that is a dreamlike feel that is occasionally punctured by scenes of really graphic sex and violence. It is very, very disturbing at times, quite shocking at times, especially for, when you go into it, a book that is a praised literary work of fiction that won awards. It feels like, full on horror at times. And in fact, it had to me the kind of vibe of, if you think of 1970s European horror movies, so directors like Dario Argento or Jess Franco, who made these kind of slightly weird horror movies that have kind of sometimes like, you know, beautiful cinematography and things like that, and, you know, interesting use of colour, and then will also have scenes of really, really graphic violence. It's got that kind of dreamlike vibe to it, which I personally find quite interesting and beguiling. I quite enjoy books like that. But it is a book where I was not always clear on exactly what was happening. It's a very confusing book at times, but I don't mind that in books. You know, it depends the kind of book I'm reading. Sometimes when I'm reading a, you know, more straightforward kind of book, I get frustrated if I don't feel like the author is communicating to me effectively, you know, what's going on and what the characters are doing. But for a book like this, which is, you know, deliberately surreal and weird, I actually quite get into the groove of a vibe like that sometimes. So it's definitely an interesting book. As I say, it is quite hard to come by. So you may want to think twice about grabbing a copy. But if you're a fan of kind of darker fiction, especially kind of experimental horror fiction, I do think it's an interesting book and worth checking out. So those are my thoughts on Children of the Black Sabbath by Hébert. I think by the end of this video, I've decided I did quite like it. I'm certainly glad that I read it. I do think it's a really interesting book, even if it is quite confusing at times, and definitely a lot more literary than a lot of the books I read. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, particularly if you've read this book or anything else by Hébert. And as always, thanks very much for watching. I hope you're safe and well out there. I hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.